till we have it work.
We've only just come around to this at Bathurst Council. And it is sensitive.
Good afternoon, everyone. All members, could I ask that all mobile phones please go on flight mode or silent, or off or on flight mode, please. Note the meeting will commence at 2:30 p.m. First item on the agenda is the acknowledgement of country. Council acknowledges the traditional custodians of the lands where we work and live. Council celebrates the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of the New South Wales Central Tablelands. Recording of meeting. Members and the public are advised that the proceedings of this meeting, other than any confidential matters to be considered later, will be recorded and made publicly available on the council website. And persons attending the meeting should refrain from making any defamatory comments. Members may attend the meeting with the approval of council by audio-visual means. A request by a member for approval to attend the meeting by audio-visual means must be made in writing to the general manager prior to the meeting in question, and must provide reasons why the council would be prevented from attending the meeting in person. I note that the general manager has advised me that there have been no such requests for this meeting. Fourth item is the oath and affirmation. Member Andrew Smith, could I ask that you select an oath or affirmation for this meeting, please? The wording is in your papers.
I, Andrew Smith, solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that I will undertake the duties of office of County Council area in the Upper Macquarie County Council, and that I will faithfully and impartially carry out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in me under the Local Government Act 1993 or any other act to the best of my ability and judgment.
Thank you very much, Member Smith. The fifth item on the agenda is the apologies. We have an apology from Member Bruce Watt. The sixth item is confirmation of minutes.
I'll move the apology.
Do I have someone to move the minutes of the meeting of
apology? I'll also move the apology.
Oh, sorry. Could you move the apology? Thank you.
Yes,
Can I have a second of the apology? Thank you. All in favour? Accepting the apology? Going on.
I'll move the minutes.
The minutes of the previous meeting, which were the dated 11th of February. Can I have a mover of moving those? We have Stephen Leslie moving them. Second. Alan, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any matters arising out of those minutes? None, so we move on to the next item. Disclosures of interest. Has any member got a disclosure of interest, noting that the disclosure wording has changed somewhat? Could I have a mover? Thank you. Councillor Fry, Councillor O'Connor, yes. Are there any disclosures of interest? No disclosures of interest. Move on to the next item. We have to approve that, don't we? All in favour?
All right.
Right. The next matter is the County Council meeting schedule for 2022. There's a recommendation. The council notes the changes to the proposed meeting schedule. And the second is that the council adopt the proposed meeting schedule. The meeting schedule set out in the body of the report. Could I have a mover, please? Fry, Councillor O'Connor. Any discussion on that? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to encourage people as we move through in the Oberon area, for example, in June, hopefully we can get some local landholders to come along, and again, Blaney in October and Lithgow in November. It's good that county council's moving out and about, so just commend that we're getting those meetings throughout the county council area. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And maybe you should encourage Bathurst, because it's here on the 13th of May. Any landholders who wish to be present or present to the meeting. So maybe members Smith and Fry could look into that.
Copy.
Copy.
Okay, all in favour of the resolution as written? Thank you. Unanimously passed. The statement of investments as at the 31st of March, which is item 2. Recommendation is that council notes the statement of investments report as at the 31st of March 2022. Pursuant to section 625(2) of the Act, the Minister issued a revised investments order by way of the New South Wales Government Gazette. That order requires the county council to only invest money in specific range of investments and in Australian currency. Investment funds are cash funds held by council, other than those required for operational purposes held by the consolidated account established under Clause 204 of the Local Government Act. I think it's the first sentence as part of the recommendation. So, leaving aside, the recommendation is council notes the statement of investments reports as of the 31st of March 2022. So, move it, please. Councillor Reynolds, Member Smith, seconder. Any discussion in relation to the investments? Yes. Member Reynolds.
I'm just going to highlight that council's currently looking at an investment policy, and so we may look at different investments moving forward, but that should come to the next council meeting.
It would be good if we could increase our return over 0.3% or whatever it is. Any other members wish to talk to this item? All in favour? Any against? No against, all in favour. The next item is the proposed associate membership of the Central New South Wales Joint Organisation. The recommendation is that council formally requests the joint Central New South Wales Joint Organisation that it be accepted as an associate member. I think it's probably a better word. Because you have to, it's formally request, it doesn't say who you request. So I've slightly amended that in my phraseology so that we have someone we're requesting. Could I have a mover, please? Fry and O'Connor. Members Fry and O'Connor. Can we have some discussion on this, please, the members? I note that it's going to cost us approximately 2,000 a year, is it? 2,000 to 5,000. We anticipate that if we make the application that we should be accepted. Yes.
Yes, that's my understanding.
And it will give us obviously greater advocacy and support with in our constituent area, with our constituent councils and outside that area as well. So I ask for discussion on this matter from Member Reynolds and Member Leslie. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I see opportunities potentially here. A number of other councils, I think there's
16 or 16.
16, I think it was Lithgow, probably 16 or 17.
But opportunities to undertake networking with other councils that are outside of the Central Tablelands area in particular. You look at councils like Parks, Forbes, Lachlan, Shire, etc. And whether there are opportunities for this county council to work in collaboration with another area, but also the potential cost savings, as you mentioned, that we might be able to joint tender on certain things, and particularly maybe on chemical supply or other things that whether we can work in with those other councils to maybe look at putting in tenders for chemicals, as an example. So I see all but opportunities for a very small cost to this organisation. Thank you.
Sorry, Member Leslie?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Is it true that that if you join, you're not allowed to withdraw? That's seems to be the rules for councils, which is why Lithgow Council didn't join in the first place. And who would be delegate or representing Upper Macquarie County Council, will it be you, Mr. Chairman? I've got no problems with that, of course, but with you, Mr. Chairman, because as again, I understand it has to be the mayor of councils.
And the general manager.
General manager isn't, I don't think a voting member, but
No, but that
certainly
really-
attend, yes.
Just a point of clarification too, to Member Leslie's comments, we wouldn't have a vote. We're going to be an associate member, so we wouldn't actually sit at the voting table. Because I think Central Tablelands County Council, for example, is another associate member that while they attend and they participate and they chair the water working group or whatever the group is, they don't actually have a vote on the, because they're not a full member of it. So I think hopefully that clarifies, and generally at a council, it would be the chair, the mayor, and then the alternate would be the deputy. That's the case of my council, and I assume the same with Bathurst and other councils, Oberon, etc. So one would assume that our main delegate would be our current chair, and if the chair is unavailable, then the deputy would be asked to represent.
I was just trying to get it on the record as to find out who it is and understand the procedures.
Well, I think it's a good question. I think Central Tablelands Water, it's the chairman of that. I think it's David sits on it, and these can't. And I think the general manager of Central Tablelands Water goes as well. I think from attendance record I've seen.
That's correct.
So that's probably how we would have it here as well. As to the question of withdrawing, I actually don't know that question. I'm not sure if the general manager knows. As an associate member, it's probably not such a financial risk for us at $2,000. Obviously, councils pay a bit more, quite a bit more than that. So, but I do take the point. We can certainly ask that question, but it may not be obviously before the vote today. But we can make that question, ask the question before we formally give them our position. I think the other, it was touched on by Member Reynolds, the other opportunity this may give us is if other councils surrounding the state believe that we are doing a good job, we may get, as well as increasing our chemical sales, etc., we may get advisory work out of this, which may allow us to also charge fees for that work. So advising them how to set up their enforcement and compliance policy, for instance. So there are, I think that as has been said, I certainly believe that there are opportunities with doing this. Any other comments, please, members? All those in favour? Pass unanimously. The prosecution fund, which is item 4. The recommendation is that council notes the information set out below. As the person who attended the State Weeds Council in Albury on the 21st of March, there was a paper provided to the State Weeds Council, as most members know, in December last year, on the concept of setting up a biosecurity prosecution fund to fund prosecutions going forward with proceeds, with amounts recovered from court paid back into that fund, so that it would need seed capital, either from WAP funding or state government funding, to set up the fund, which would be used to fund legal fees and clean up on properties that have failed to comply with biosecurity directions and then penalty infringement notices. I provided a presentation to the State Weeds Committee in Albury on the 21st of March, using that paper as a basis. There was broad support from the State Weeds Committee on the concept. Subsequent to that, we have sent a minister, and the Minister of Agriculture, Dougal Saunders, was on a Zoom meeting into the State Weeds Council, so I took the opportunity of raising the issue of the prosecution fund, and as a result of that, we have sent a letter to the Minister with a copy of the paper that went to the State Weeds Committee. The DPI raised a number of queries at the meeting on the 21st of March, their representatives. One of them was that our rate of inspections may not be, was lower than some other councils. And they questioned to some degree whether we had exhausted all areas of encouragement of landholders. On the second issue, I think we probably convinced them that we had. On the first, they were not convinced that our rate of inspections was in the highest levels in the state for the amount of area we have. So that's still an area that we need to do some convincing. And DPI was although they had recommended that we set out in detail the structure and how the structure of the fund would work, I felt there was still some hesitancy there, but most members were in support of it and appreciated the detail we'd taken in setting out how the fund would be administered, how the panel of lawyers, how the monies would come in and out. So that's the position we are at the current state. As I said, we sent a letter to the Minister for Agriculture. There's been acknowledged and received, but we haven't had an opportunity to speak to directly about it. Could I have a mover, please? Rye and Smith. Members Rye and Smith. Any other discussion on the paper? I should have asked for a mover and second before I started talking. Sorry. Procedure.
Start again. Jokes.
Thank you. Any other comments or on the prosecution fund?
I'd just like to congratulate you, Mr. Chairman, on taking this and doing it. It's the way this organisation has to go. We've got to be able to prosecute, so we've got to be able to have a body with teeth. And until we get some successful prosecutions, that won't be apparent. And the more people and the more organisations we can get involved in this, the better. And so I think your approach is spot on.
Thank you, Member.
Yeah, I also congratulate you, Mr. Chairman, but if you could also keep us abreast of any reciprocal letters or communications you have with the Minister for Agriculture and where those talks go, because I think it's a good opportunity to get friendly with him and move this organisation forward and really sharpen those teeth.
Absolutely, will be discussed. I can discuss in general terms. Obviously, can't discuss in detail. I suppose the next thing is, if, as Member Leslie touched on, if we are successful with several prosecutions, I think the media releases, etc., spike up considerably, and that will be a much stronger position for us to talk to the Minister with at that time. Sure. Member Reynolds, sorry.
May I suggest, Mr. Chair, you also send a letter to the Shadow Agriculture Minister of New South Wales?
Yes.
Just highlighting exactly the same as to the current Agriculture Minister, what we're doing and what we're proposing.
I think that's an excellent idea. Could you make a note of that, and we'll work on that next week? I certainly do. Yes. Any other matters of discussion on this this item?
Maybe to that point, Mr. Chair, sorry to double dip. Potentially in the current climate, it might be worth doing something similar, although it's not directly related to this, but making representation in our body's work and awareness to the Federal Agriculture Minister as well, to see if there are any opportunities there to work with a different government on a different level.
So we're talking about the current Minister for Agriculture and the current Shadow Minister for Federal Agriculture.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Bearing in mind there's an election coming up on the 21st of May, I think we're probably not going to have much opportunity to meet with either of them before the 21st of May.
Just a letter.
Just a letter, yeah, yes. Okay. All right. All in favour of the proposal? Of the recommendation, sorry. Thank you. Passed unanimously. Item 5, the roadside spraying program 2021-22 update. The recommendation is that Council notes the report on the roadside spraying program 2021-22. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Ewan, second. I just before we open this matter for discussion, I note, and correct me, General Manager or Chief Biosecurity Officer, I believe that as of today, 100% of all those council roads that were to be sprayed have been done, and 100% of funds has been exhausted in the 4 council areas. Is that correct?
So I don't think it's 100% of the roads, it's all of the funds that they.
No, I'm not saying 100% of all roads in all council areas. All those that were due to be sprayed or allocated. No, we've allocated. All right, 100% of the funds have been spent.
There you go.
So no more roads to be sprayed in this financial year because all funds have been expended. Okay, can I open this matter for discussion?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So we've spent the 100%, and that included the $80,000 that we put forward from reserves as well. So that's indicating that we're very much short on the mark of roadside spend spraying. Earlier we spoke about the budget, so I think we need to look at alternative ways of raising more funds to roadside spray. And I guess it's been highlighted because of the last two years of exceptional seasons. So that is a huge priority, I guess, for us as a council. When if we can be seen to be doing the job on the roads, then it becomes maybe a little easier for those on the other side of the fence to follow suit, so to speak.
Thank you, Member Young. 3 years ago, we did go back to all the councils asking them to increase their contributions to the road spraying at that stage. I can't remember exactly what the increase was. Was it?
Mr. Chair, I can elaborate.
Yeah.
Back, it was either 3 or 4 years ago, council didn't contribute anything directly to roadside
That's
spraying.
right, yeah.
As in the county council at that stage asked for each council to contribute a separate fund to roadside spraying, which took 4 years, I think it was, or 3 years to come up to 100%. So the county council covered a certain amount of the cost over those 4 years, separate to the general contribution that each council made to the running of Upper Macquarie County Council.
Yes, and so if you look at the original figures that were in the budget prior to the 80,000, they were the amounts that were contributed by each of the councils as a separate fund from 3 years ago.
Yes.
So it was ratcheted up, as Member Reynolds said.
Yep.
So again, what percentage of the total roads in the 4 constituent councils would be, I think you had that on your spreadsheet at one stage, so you can tell, if you could tell us. So if we look at each council individually, because I know it's different.
So looking at the percentage of the roads that were sprayed within each council area, including the extra funding. So Bathurst has a total of 1,172 kilometres, which we got through 43.7% of.
So what was that? 47.
43.7% of Bathurst. Yeah. Blaney has a total of 701 kilometres, which we got through 21.9%. Lithgow 918 kilometres, we got through 25.9. Oberon 938, we got through 21.7.
So apart from Bathurst, the rest are all around that 20, 21.
20 to 25.
Yeah, 21 to 25%.
Sorry, can I add something to that?
Yes.
Sorry, those statistics have actually been circulated to you separately, along with those,
That's right.
the draft papers that I sent out this morning. So if you're looking at that detail again, you're welcome to have a look.
In that spreadsheet, I think.
There, yeah, I sent a spreadsheet this morning. Yeah, it's only just this morning.
So that, for most of our council areas, that would mean that if we were on current expenditure and the weeds were as bad as this year, then it'd take 5 years to start the turnaround to get on the roads. 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Apart from Bathurst, which was way up around 40%, 43%. So that gives you an idea. Obviously some, yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman Andrew. Well, it just doesn't work, does it? Because 5 years, you're worse off than you were when you started, really. You know, we really need to be trying to achieve a turnaround of every, at the worst scenario, at least every 2 years to be back on that road. Otherwise, we're just not making headway. We're going backwards. It's pretty obvious, isn't it?
It is, though, as was indicated, I think at the last meeting, and this year in particular, because of the amount of weed growth and the way the environment was, it was taking us 3 times as long and 3 times as much chemical to do each kilometre of road. I think would be a reasonable synopsis.
If I can use this, so if you look at this year and then we look at last year as a comparison,
Yeah.
apart from Bathurst, which increased slightly, basically the other councils have stayed within a few percent of what they were last year with the addition of the extra 80 grand on top. So basically that extra 80 grand has only kept us at the same with the extra growth increase in the season we had this year. So that helps you to sort of.
And cost of chemical, I can imagine, come into that absorption of the 80,000.
That's it, yeah. A lot of our chemicals have gone up 50 to 100% compared to where they were last year, which is a factor we're just got to absorb.
Member Reynolds made a good point. It might be something we could potentially solve in a JO situation if we decide to join that organisation.
I just don't know what the appetite of our respective constituent councils would be in the current environment to go back to them to ask for considerable additional funds for roadside spraying.
Except at some point, the constituent councils have to be told it is their security responsibility, not the responsibility of the Upper Macquarie County Council.
If I can, thank you guys. Be aware where we've sent directions to each of the 4 constituent councils outlining that the roads are their responsibility. It's not the responsibility of the county. So,
Member Reynolds?
So just going to update the county council, I had a discussion with the acting general manager for next week. As our general manager has announced her resignation, will be taking leave before she starts at the new council.
Planning council.
That's Blaney Council, correct.
Okay.
And I have floated an idea to try and increase the amount of funding from Blaney through an indirect way, through a voluntary planning agreement. And I've also talked to the director, the appropriate director that covers that as well. And both staff members have said that they not said a no, so it'll be up to the individual councillors. So when I put the proposal,
So I would be suggesting that it might be worth respectively at least one of us for each of our constituent councils doing a report and indicating what that would entail, just so they're informed. Sure.
We can support you, sorry.
Yeah, we can support.
I can support you put together whatever statistics that you might need to evidence your request.
All right. Any other discussion on that paper? Thanks, Chris. I think it's informative for spreadsheets and stuff.
just kind of
Yes, certainly.
thing too, when you are telling your councils, the kilometres that we have down will be different to the kilometres that each council has down for the road size. The reasons being that none of the councils counted any of the highways in their areas because they class the work on them for the road surfaces being either RMS, where then RMS doesn't take responsibility for the weed side of things. So it's mainly those extra roads added in. That's why you'll see if you get comments from the councils come back saying the numbers don't match up in terms of the kilometres of road.
So it includes highways, state roads and regional roads.
Regional roads. It doesn't include urban roads, so it doesn't include anything that falls within what we deem as urban, so inside a built up area or the less than 80 kilometre speed zones.
So maybe if I could ask through you, General Manager, if we could maybe just do a little note to the council to explain it to each of us, so that when we do our report.
That's fine. When we have a look at that spreadsheet, the roads are listed like roads for Bathurst, roads for Blaming, etc. They're the roads we're talking about.
Yeah.
So if you want a number of roads in or out,
I think when councils are going to do their report for council, they need to say something like, no, this does not include urban roads. But the roads do include all state and regional roads from the area, but not urban roads.
I'll send something out.
Yeah. All right. All in favour of the report? You're going to item 6, penalty infringement notice is issued. The recommendation is that council notes the report on the PIN status update. Member Reynolds. Can you move it, please? Member Reynolds and Member O'Connor. Sorry. Are you going to speak on it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm happy. Total paid, a question through to you to possibly the acting general manager. We've issued 64. I assume a few have been in the last few weeks, but we've only seen 13 withdrawn. So that leaves 51. Yet we've only received revenue. It's a quite strange level of revenue at $22,165. So that indicates that there's roughly 30 pins still outstanding. Is there a reason why there's so many outstanding, and how we can actually get that revenue back?
General Manager?
Yeah.
Yes.
So the reason is people haven't paid them. Quite simply put, and that's where we have our basic license with Revenue New South Wales, and they do the chasing for us. So I can send out, there's a little flow chart of how revenue actually goes about collecting the outstanding fines and what timeframes are imposed. 30 days, 60 days, and what actually happens to the people if they don't pay it. So the consequences of not paying their fines. Ours is a general penalty. If it was a driving offence, it would be specifically driving penalty. So if you're ever Googling something like this, ours comes under a general penalty. But I can send out the flowchart of how long it takes. But for example, one of the very first fines that we sent out, that particular person has now received 2 fines, both of which have not been paid, and that was from back in 2019, I want to say. So that's just an example of some people just don't pay. So
maybe to just, what's the end result if they continue to not abide by Debt Recovery New South Wales?
I'd much prefer to refer to the flow charts when I get my hands on it, but it's something along the lines of if they don't, the consequences of not paying it at the end may impact your license, your driving license, and
Maybe on the property?
I'm not sure if it goes that far. I think it depends on the kind of fine, but I think it can certainly affect their driving license, gun licenses.
Our pins, from my understanding, Mr. Chair, our pins are under the same category as those that were given for COVID breaches outside. They use that general term as the opportunity to do the pin. And from my understanding, eventually, is there not jail time available to people that are way delayed in paying one or multiple pins?
There is, I believe, so they do try and work with people to try and get the payment. They do avoid jail. They do try and get them to work it off, or they enter them into certain agreements. I can't really remember the exact details of those kinds of agreements. So things like, yeah, they might work for the community or do something like that to pay off that debt in some way or another, or they can garnish wages, things like that. That's what I'm led to believe. I will find the flow chart though, and I can send it out to you. It's online. You can all. It's easy to find.
Just revenue, New South Wales.
Yeah, it's public. Yeah.
So further question, Mr. Chair. Are these, if we've issued 64 pins, are they actually on our financial accounts that well, there's 13 withdrawn and we've paid, so there's approximately $29,000 that hasn't been paid. Do they appear on our financial accounts?
Is that listed as debtors, you mean?
Yes.
And again, this is just from memory, so I can't remember specifically, but the auditor does recognise them as owing as long as it's lapsed since we've issued them by, I think it's 60 days. Because then that time in which the person can have it reviewed has gone normally, generally speaking, and so that's when they start to recognise it. But it's only made I only make the adjustment at the end of financial year to see which ones have that criteria, and then they're added.
Would it follow the current liabilities the minute it's issued?
No, not the minute that it's issued, because it could be, we don't go to the effort of entering it until we know that it's confirmed.
Okay,
Could be
so after
appealed.
60 days it becomes a current liability.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Well, can I ask, just out of pure curiosity, what is the appeals process and how would it be appealed or reviewed?
Yes.
We have that peer review.
So ordinarily, they go through Revenue New South Wales, and ours are like a paper fine, well, they are a paper fine,
Yeah.
carbon copy. On the back of it, it tells somebody how they can have their fine reviewed, just like if you are receiving a driving infringement.
Not me.
They get on the phone or they email through to Revenue New South Wales and say this is unfair, they type out their reasons, that then comes through to us because we're so specific. So normally Revenue New South Wales would handle something that's more simple like a driving infringement, but they actually send it through to us. So Chris issues the fine, the general manager does the reviews. So I actually conduct the reviews of the evidence, the reasons, and so on and so forth.
Sure, thank you.
Follow up, Mr. Chair, given that we're coming towards the end of another financial year and some people may be doing community service, is there a process that, and therefore never pay the fine, is there a process that we know where if they've done community service or they're doing something else rather than paying us as an entity the fine, so we can write off those? Because one would suspect, like you mentioned, the first penalty infringement notice and they were issued with the second one, as in what has actually happened with them and how many years are we going to keep it on the books as before we actually write it off?
Revenue New South Wales do issue a report, I think it's annually, about where they all sit and what they're actually doing, whether or not they were court elect, how many withdrawn, how many were not written correctly, or whatever it is. And so in that report, I imagine that we could probably find that. I haven't actually had that much time to delve into it, but I know that Revenue New South Wales are very approachable and easy to deal with and talk to, so I imagine that I could probably find out fairly easily.
Mr. Chair.
Any other discussion on this matter? All those in favour of the recommendation, the council notes the report of the ministers. Any against? Carried unanimously. Next issue is confidential matter. Motion, the council notes in accordance with section 9(2)(a) of the Local Government Act 1993, the general manager's opinion that business and the agenda designated confidential, the list in the table 1 is of the kind referred to in section 10(a)(2) of the Act, which should be dealt with in part of the meeting closed to the media and public. And further, in accordance with section 10(b)(1) of the Act, it is considered the discussion of business is open, meeting will be in balance, be conflict of public interest. Could I have someone move us into confidential, please? Thank you, Member Reynolds and Member O'Connor.
I'll just stop the recording.
Could you stop the recording and I'd ask the Chief Fire Security Officer to leave the meeting for the first item on the agenda, please. Thank you, Acting General Manager. Could you please read out the resolutions arising from confidential business, please?
Yes. For the County Chairman's report number 1, the report on process and outcome of the recruitment process and the interviews conducted for the position of General Manager of Upper Macquarie County Council be received and noted. Number 2, that the decision on the appointment of a General Manager be deferred for a period of 3 weeks for further consideration by the recruitment panel, with a potential candidate being recommended to the May meeting, which is the next meeting. Number 3, that council maintain the confidentiality of the documents and considerations in respect of the General Manager recruitment process. For the County Chairman's report number 2, council notes the report on the prosecution cases. Item 7, confidential, note the report on public authorities read by security compliance. And item 8, note the report on landholder compliance.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. There being no further business, I declare the meeting closed with the next meeting to be on May 13th at 2:30 PM at these premises. Thank you everyone for your attendance and spirited contribution. Thank you.